Hi there. I'm delighted to be on Legends of Tabletop today. My name is Ellen Datlow, and I'm a short story editor. I've been editing short stories in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, about since 1980 or so when I started work at OMNI Magazine. And I moved more into horror over the years, but I still edit short science fiction occasionally and novellas. So hi. And anthologies.
Yes. Yes, specifically the year's best and best of the best.
Well, yes, I used to do the year's best fantasy and horror, Terry Windling, and then for Gavin Grant and Kelly Link. That was for about 21 volumes. And then after that, for about 10 years now, I've been editing the best horror of the year for Nightshade. And yes, best of the best horror of the year is coming out, I think next month, maybe this month, probably next month. And that is my favorite stories from all the 10 years that I actually have been editing the best horror of the year, which is tough, but.
I can imagine. How do you just pick the amount that's allotted to go into those volumes?
Well, the best of the best was tough. Well, it was easy and it was tough. I mean, basically, I went through my table of contents for the first 10 years. And I knew I wanted to get a certain writers in. And most of those writers I have picked multiple stories from. Not all of them, but some. So it was actually a balancing act because I wanted to get at least 2 stories from each volume. So I think there are 2 to 4 stories from each of the 10 volumes. I also did not want to duplicate. 2 years ago, my book Nightmares came out, and that was for Tachyon Press, and it's called, I think, A New Decade in Modern Horror. And a lot of the stories in that book were also from my year's bests over the years. So I didn't want to duplicate any of those stories. So I had to basically pick stories I tried to pick stories that may not have been reprinted a lot. And I wanted to pick different lengths, and I wanted to pick different writers. So it was kind of a juggling act of what I came up with. But mostly I picked stories that I remembered. I mean, I remember a lot of what I published, but, when there are certain stories that stick in your mind. So I kind of I made a big list for each year from each volume. And then I kind of picked and chose and tried to mix it around. So it worked out. And I can't remember, it's a pretty big book. I don't remember how many words it is, but it's at least, I'd have to look it up. It's at least 160,000, maybe 200,000 words. I don't remember. I'd have to look it up.
Now, tell me a little bit more about the Mad Hatters and March Hares project.
Okay. I have always loved Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, probably as much for the illustrations as for the text. And for years, I've been collecting different versions of different illustrated Alices. So I've always been, it's not an obsession, but I just love it. I love how different artists treat characters. And I was at a convention a few years ago where I was being interviewed, and someone actually in the audience said, well, I have done a couple of anthologies that were influenced by certain writers, like Lovecraft Unbound and Children of Lovecraft, and Poe. So and those were anthologies that I asked the writers to write stories that were influenced by those writers. And someone in the audience said, well, who else would you like to do an anthology by? And it's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know, stories maybe inspired by Alice in Wonderland. And after the panel, a whole bunch of mostly women came up to me in the bar and said, we want to be in that book. Let's do it. Please do it. So I said, oh, okay, it's actually not a bad idea. So that's basically how the idea came to me. And then I was luckily able to get Tor to buy it. And so that's what so that's what the book is. It's stories influenced by Lewis Carroll, this is one of the anthologies like Poe, where I asked the writers to tell me what character or what aspect of the theme they were going to write about, so I wouldn't get too many repetitions. Although I did find I was getting too many repetitions of use of reflections and mirrors, so I had to tell people, oh, okay, for the writers who hadn't written stories yet, I said, no more mirrors. I don't want any mirrors in here, or reflections. So that's basically how I did it, and that's what the book's about. It's stories influenced by Lewis Carroll and or the characters or the actual stories of Alice. And there are a couple of horror stories. It's mostly fantasy and dark fantasy, but there are a couple of actual horror stories in there too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let's see. What else was I going to ask about? Well, with your working with OMNI, was that your initial foray into editing?
It was my first time ever working with a magazine. I had been in book publishing for about five miserable years. Well, I wouldn't say miserable, but it was basically getting nowhere slowly. I started in book publishing as a sales secretary for Little Brown in New York. I had a New York office, and I was an editorial assistant. And I got to be assistant editor at some publisher, but I didn't really I did not flourish in book publishing. And then when I was unemployed in between jobs at some point, someone from one of the companies I worked at mentioned this new magazine, OMNI, and maybe I could get a job there. That was the book publishers I worked for were mainstream book publishers. It was trade publishing. It was, not academic publishing. It was like Little Brown, Crown, Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston. But anyway, so OMNI was the first job I ever got in magazine publishing. And that was around 19. OMNI had started October 78. I think I started there around 79, possibly, late 79. What happened is, someone at Holt said, why don't you go and talk to this guy at OMNI who's the editor, that was Frank Kendig. Frank Kendig was doing a book for Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston, so that's how this other editor knew him. And he knew he was the head of OMNI. Why don't you go talk to him? So I did. And Ben Bova was the fiction editor at the time. And I said, hey, I'd love to work with you. I like science fiction, And they said, yeah, that's nice. It's like, we don't need you. But Ben did not have an assistant at the time. He had a secretary who did not read any fiction at all. Usually at least in science fiction, usually the publisher, an editor would have an assistant who was interested in the field and would read the slush pile. In this case, Ben only had a secretary who did not read slush for him. Do you know what slush is?
Yes.
Okay, all right. But anyway, I kept I talked to Ben a few times, and I basically harangued him every few months. I said, hey, is there an opening? Hey, is there an opening? And I went in and talked to him, and it was the year of the Brighton World Con in either 79 or 80. And he was going to England for like a month or something, or 3 weeks. And I was going for the first time to the West Coast, California, for like, I was going to be back 1 week before he was. And I said, and it was, and slush was actually paper. I said, I can read your slush pile. I can read your slush pile and catch up before you get back. And I don't know why. First, let me think about it. But he didn't even know me from a hole in the wall. I don't know why he would trust me with his slush pile, but he did. And sure enough, I was able to, winnow it down. And when I came back, he basically just said, hang around, keep hanging around, just hang around. And I said, what do you mean? Hang around the office, see if you can help anybody. Well, now everyone else was nonfiction, right? Science and future. And here I am, this idiot who no one knows, and saying, hey, can I help you do something? And I'm thinking, go away, leave me alone. No, we don't know who you are. What do you mean? But what was happening, and I didn't realize, was Ben was going to be promoted to editor of the magazine. Frank Kendig was out. Ben was being promoted to the editor, and a new fiction editor was coming in, Bob Sheckley. And I became Bob's assistant, although I was actually associate fiction editor. So that's what was going on. So at that point, even though I had really bad luck in book publishing, OMNI was kind of being in the right place at the right time. So that's how I got into OMNI. And then I worked there 17 years, and I was made fiction editor. Bob, he was there about a year and a half, I think, and he took the job partly because it's the first time he ever had a salary and an expense account. And he also had a writing block, so he wasn't writing. So what happened is about a year or a year and a half into his fiction editorship, he started writing again, and he wanted to take 2 months off in the summer to write. And Ben said, okay. And I was kind of acting fiction editor during that point. And then Bob wanted another month, and Ben said, forget it, and fired him. Or, said, no, you can't have another month. And after much back and forth, I was made the fiction editor. So that's how that happened.
Okay. So, I'm just trying to figure out how to change the echo.
Oh, is there an echo?
Yeah.
I'm not getting it on my end.
Oh, okay, good.
You sound like you're in a bowl, but you don't. It's not an echo exactly.
Oh, okay. Because that might be due to the lack of headphones, but that's okay. Wow. I mean, that is a wonderful stroke of luck. Of no, you can't have another month. You can just have forever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think he was ready to leave the job anyway. At that point, Ben was giving a lot of pushback about Bob's decisions. They had very different taste. The interesting thing is that neither Bob nor I had been in this position before. And I didn't know, and he didn't know, that usually assistants don't read everything. I mean, they usually read the slush pile and pass on the good stuff, but they don't necessarily read the good stuff. They don't necessarily read the stories from people who are well known. But neither of us knowing the process, I read everything that came in first, and I passed it on to Bob. It was like only maybe 1 or 2 stories the entire time he was there that he saw first. Oh, wow. So I got a lot more power and a lot more influence than I would have otherwise without even realizing what was going on. So that was fun. That was good.
Yeah, it was kind of a learn as you go along.
Well, actually, one thing I was going to say is editing is always learning on the job. You cannot teach editing. The only actual teaching I ever was subjected to is at one point Ben Bova came, said, here, line edit the first 2 pages of this story. I don't even remember if it was something being published or not. And I did whatever I thought, I made suggestions. And he went over those 2 pages and he said, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? That's kind of to show you in the right direction. Well, you have to have a reason for why you want to fix something or change something. But other than that, it really is learning on the job and learning how to edit. You can't teach that. I'm not talking about copy edit. That's different. You can teach. That's punctuation and grammar. Yes. But line editing, substantive editing is something you learn. You have to have some instinct for it to begin with. And part of it is not overwhelming, not imposing your voice, tone, taste on the writer, on the work that you're working on.
Okay. Now, let's see. Pete Rawlick asks, she seems to work with a variety of publishers, both large and small, and even non-traditional, such as Dark Horse Comics. What is your approach for deciding what anthologies go to which publisher?
Well, whoever will buy them, basically. And I have to say, Dark Horse is a real anomaly. And not to put Dark Horse down. I mean, Dark Horse is a great comic publisher. They have no clue how to publish books. And I have no idea why they bought any books from me. The first book that I did for them was called Lovecraft Unbound. And it was, I think that was one that was because Rob Simpson was there. And he was an old friend of mine who worked in comics in New York and then moved to wherever Dark Horse is, Oregon, I think. And was supposed to set up a book line. And he called, I don't know why they called it Empress. I still have no idea where the name came from. I mean, it was like, that's not what kind of name is that? And why is it a name for the Dark Horse? But he's the one who commissioned Lovecraft Unbound, my first Lovecraftian anthology. Mm-hmm. And then he was let go. Before the book came out, he was gone, all right? So I got a new editor. And then the new editor said, hey, you want to do another book? Or I said, you want me to do it? I said, sure. So I did another one for her. And that was supernatural noir, which I really love doing. A combination of supernatural and noir stories, which I would love to do a second volume of. And then she left. And then I had a new editor. And he said, hey, you want to do another book? I said, yeah, sure. So I did Nightmare Carnival. So I think I only did 3. And Nightmare Carnival didn't do well for whatever reason. And then they don't want to do any more books with me. You know, this is how some things work in publishers. But Dark Horse has never, I don't know what, they don't do books now. They hardly ever do books. Their books are only compilations of their graphic novels. So that was kind of an anomaly. But basically, there are certain, to answer Pete, I have certain publishers I've worked with a lot. Tor, for example. And I usually send the things I think that they'll buy to them first, unless it's a big idea and my agent thinks that she can sell it mainstream, which has happened in the past. One of my first anthologies, Alien Sex, was sold to William Morrow, but not a genre division, but just the mainstream part. And it was because my agent knew this this editor who was interested. And actually it was not supposed to be called Alien Sex, but we always called it the Alien Sex Anthology. That's a great title. I said, okay. You know, so it totally depends on circumstance. Like I've lost editors. Like I lost my editor. I had different editors at Tor, and my most recent editor, Liz Gorinsky, has left. So it's like, you know, am I going to be able to sell another book to Tor? I don't know. Some of my books do well for them and some don't. So it's a question of if they're willing to invest in another book that might not earn out, but will maybe get award nomination and attention. So it varies. I mean, it's not my publishers are not faithful to me. I am not faithful to them. It's not a question of that. It's whoever will buy it, basically. I mean, and I think we'll do a good job too, of course. It has to be a combination. Sometimes new publishers are willing to take a chance on an anthology, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You know, and that's okay too. You do a one shot. I mean, I'm proud of all my books, whether they earn out or not. I think they're good books. And you know, what's odd is you don't know why a book does well versus why a book doesn't do well. Although I'd say that non-theme anthologies do not do as well as theme anthologies, which is why most editors at theme anthologies. A non-theme anthology is a very hard sell to the publisher and to the public. Even though the public says, oh yeah, we want non-theme anthologies, not enough of them want them to make it viable.
Okay, because the sales are low.
Right, yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, that's why I did Fearful Symmetries as a Kickstarter. I won't do it again, but I did that with Cheesine, and we did a Kickstarter, and so we knew it was going to earn out. We knew we were going to make the money back as soon as we published it. But many of my other anthologies that have been, I mean, Inferno won every award I think around, but it didn't do well. I mean, it didn't earn out. You know, so Salon Fantastique that Terry and I edited, it didn't sell well, but it won the World Fantasy Award. So, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, you never know when lightning's going to strike.
Well, that's true. And lightning has struck twice for me in the past, which means I got a lot of money for anthologies that I knew, I mean, too much money. I mean, I knew that, my agent knew that, but so what? You know, I said, it's never going to earn out. And she said, so what? You go back to your usual advances. So one time you get a lot of money. That's nice. It's not like I'm an author. It's a different situation. And what's weird, of course, is the book that I'm talking about, Naked City, that was an urban fantasy anthology. It sold 27,000 hardcover, which to me is terrific. But to them, because of what they paid, it sucked. But, you know, but the sales fee is 27,000 copies is pretty damn good for a hardcover anthology.
Yes.
So that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of had a thought in my mind of the approach for deciding which go where would be like, is that in their wheelhouse? Would I even go anywhere by?
No, that's definitely important to be aware of. I mean, you know, there are publishers. Well, also there are publishers who do certain anthologies, and they're not going to take on another anthology right away. And yeah, I do reprint anthologies for Tachyon, and we have to come up with the right theme that they think they can sell. And Jacob always wants a big theme, relatively, rather than a small theme. And it's hard to think something up. I'm right now trying to work on figuring out a theme anthology. It'll be all reprints, but and that's easier for me to do in a way. I mean, in that case, it is kind of an open, not an open market, but I mean, because I don't pay much for reprints, but I ask all my writers, do you have any stories about such and such? And then, I will look at, I'm aware of some of the thematic stories that people have written. But yeah, it's coming up with the right idea and the right title.
Excellent. Now, let's, oh man, different themes. So do you see certain themes coming up within the next 6 months that authors should be aware of?
You mean that they should avoid?
Yes, that too.
Actually, interestingly, I was just thinking about something. I just read a story about something, and I realized I have a story coming out in an anthology. I have a ghost story anthology coming out. It was supposed to come out this fall. It's coming out next fall, called Echoes, the saga anthology of ghost stories. That's really big. That's like, I think that's 227,000 words. And it's all originals, but 3 reprints. But there's a story in there, and a story I just read that are about people having Alzheimer's, the disease, and losing their selves. And I know other people have written about them. That seems to be something that's of concern naturally to people who are faced with that in their parents or themselves. And I think I'm not looking. I mean, in a way, it's the kind of thing that can be tiresome really quickly, because if you don't do anything interesting with it, it's just someone losing their memory. And it's when a theme becomes too much of a, well, it's like cyberpunk. Cyberpunk, when it started out, was really fresh and new. It was a way of looking at things. It was tonal. But then you have to have the branching off of what stories use. Then it becomes, it becomes trappings, but you have to have a really good story. This story is not about cyberpunk. It is about something, and the cyberpunk is the trapping. And in a way, that's kind of like other themes, other things that become when people. Well, it's like when you have a vampire story. You can't do a vampire story now that will work to say, "Oh, surprise! This person's a vampire," and that's the story. No, because we've been doing that for 50 years. We've known that for 50 years or more.
Yeah.
More than that.
So
100 years. So yeah, I mean, so it's what you do with it. And so the same thing with the Alzheimer's theme, the theme of forgetfulness, of losing yourself, losing your memory. You have to do something really extraordinary with it to make it different. Or it's just another, someone's losing their memory, is it real or not? Are they remembering things or not? So that people have to be careful of that. So I would never, that's something I'm noticing lately, that kind of story. Whether it's a theme, I'm not sure if it's a full-blown theme or something that's an interest that people are taking in that subject.
Maybe because
well, at least I'm not getting it.
Okay. Unfortunately, it seems to me that it is a worn-out trope, because it's more of a reminder of actual reality, and we want to read fiction to escape what we have to face on a daily basis.
Yes, I mean, it's really depressing to read about people losing their minds, and that's something that we may all face, or a lot of us will face. But on the other hand, a lot of horror, psychological horror, is based on reality, unless it's some super killer, But and we like reading about that. I mean, if it's well done. So I wouldn't. So it depends on why you read horror or why you read stories. Do you read horror?
I do. I'm actually currently reading Christina Henry's Alice. I'm in the middle of that because a friend gave it to me, and he was like, "Read this," and I said, "Okay." Alice. It's a Alice in Wonderland twist.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And it's horror?
No.
Oh.
Kind of. It's more of a thriller. It's an alternate universe Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
So that kind of sparked my interest in how Mad Hatters and March Hares came about. And let's see. What was I going to say? Which one of these science fiction novels and works are your favorite, and why? Is it Star Wars, Star Trek, or Dune? And why would that be?
The books, you mean? Oh, the movies, obviously. It has.
Yeah, books, movies.
But Star Wars isn't originally a movie, neither is Star Trek. Isn't originally a text.
No.
They were about the same. I mean, I actually saw the Dune. I never saw the Dune, the David Lynch Dune, and it's much better than I expected. Let's put it that way. It was fun. I mean, it's weird and it's fun, and it's okay. I like Star Wars. I have to admit, I haven't seen anything beyond the first 2 or so Star Trek movies. I enjoy them, but that's not the kind. I realize what I really like are crime movies, shoot 'em up crime movies.
The which ones?
Shoot 'em up crime movies.
Oh yeah.
Fast and Furious.
Mm-hmm.
I like crime movies. I like science fiction movies. And I like the most recent Star Wars. I think I saw one. I don't even know if it was the most recent one. The one. See, I can't remember the title.
I can't either. Like Into Darkness or something.
Maybe was that the last one about a year ago?
No
that was the last one I saw. And there may be one since. I'm not even sure. So I'm confused. But
how did Alien Sex come about?
Okay, actually, that and Blood Is Not Enough were my 2 first partly original anthologies, and they both came about. I was working at OMNI Magazine. And it hadn't even occurred. I mean, I had edited a few OMNI anthologies, just best OMNIs. Like for Zebra, we did 6 books of just reprints from OMNI. So those are the only anthologies I had done so far. And one of my colleagues, I assume you know that OMNI was connected to Penthouse, it was owned by Bob Guccione. Well, someone I knew at Penthouse approached me he said, "Why don't you do? I may be getting a gig being an editor for a series of anthologies, science fiction anthologies. Would you be interested? Can you give me some pitches? And I'd hire you to, if it happens, I'll hire you to be the editor." So I came up with a bunch of stories, actually 3 or 4 pitches. One was for Alien Sex, and I assume I just called it that. One was vampires, and one was monkey stories. And basically they were based on the stories that I had turned down for OMNI. Like I had turned down Pope of the Chimps by Bob Sheckley. I'm not sure why I turned it down. I love the story. But there, and Rachel and Love, at least one other one, Her Furry Face. So there were those stories. And also, okay, so for Alien Sex, there were stories I turned down, like Dancing Chickens, Her Furry Face. Anyway, some stories that I thought were too sexual. This is when I started out at OMNI, and I later would have published them, some of them, I think. And definitely some of them I would have. But some were just too harsh for what I thought would be for a national magazine. So I had turned them down, but I loved them. So those were kind of the kernel of these anthology ideas. So I mentioned here, I would take these stories and I would commission 6 others or something. So 2 of the ideas were the vampirism one, which became Blood Is Not Enough. And as I said, I don't remember if I called it Alien Sex, but the sex anthology, and that became Alien Sex. But actually my title was Off Limits, which I called the second volume that I eventually did. I wanted to call it Off Limits, but my agent, and Marilee Heifetz is my agent, but she was and she was first a friend, and she was an agent. Said, I'll represent you if you want. I said, okay. So she would call it the Alien Sex Anthology, and so she got the attention of this young editor at Morrow. I think it was William Morrow. No, William Morrow did Blood Is Not Enough. Alien Sex was, I'm trying to remember. I have the book on my shelf. I can't remember who did the paperback, the hardcover. Oh, well. I'll have to look it up. So anyway, that's how that sold. Some, those the thing with my colleague never panned out, of course. I mean, it didn't happen. But I said, well, I have these ideas for anthologies now. What should I do with them? I must have had dinner with Nerily or something. So, well, I'll try to sell them. I can try to sell them. So that's what happened. I mean, I'd done them for something else. That's how a lot of things happen. It's serendipity. You do something for one thing, it doesn't pan out, but maybe later on, maybe a year later, it'll pan out to something else. And that happens with anthology ideas. I mean, I have a file of dead anthology ideas. But, once in a while, I may trot one out and say, hey, to a new editor or someone, or just someone that say, hey, I'm who's interested in doing anthologies with me, and say, well, do you have any ideas? Well, how about this? And then they'll say, yeah, sure, I like that. That's happened with anthologies that I've had anthologies I couldn't sell, and then eventually they did sell, because I trotted out this old idea that I loved, but I couldn't sell.
Have you ever had a story that you absolutely loved, but you could not find a home for?
Oh, yeah, many times. Sure. Okay. I mean, in OMNI, I had turned down stories that I adored, but I didn't feel they were right for OMNI. But see, those stories, many of those stories I would reprint. I was able to reprint in other anthologies when I was doing anthologies. And if there's a story that I'm sent and I really, really love that story and I have no place to publish it, I will recommend other places. Magazines, usually I don't know who else is doing what anthologies, but I'll often, if I really love a story, and it depends on why I'm turning it down. And yeah, there are stories that are totally inappropriate, but I might try to fit them into whatever I'm working on. Like Tor.com, I can pretty much buy what I want for the short stories, and as long as I have room, and we have limited space because there are several people soliciting stories for it. But sometimes, once in a while, there's a story that I'm just not sure is right for Tor.com. In fact, I just bought a story, a science fiction story I have published a couple of stories that are pretty offensive, that could be considered offensive on Tor.com. And at least 2 of them have been published with no problem. In fact, both of them won awards. But so there. But I was hesitant. Well, okay, I was not hesitant about buying it. One of the stories I'm thinking of is Fabulous Beast by Priya Sharma, which won the British Fantasy Award, I think, and was nominated for a bunch of other awards. And it's now in her new collection, all the Fabulous Beasts. I think it was a terrific collection. And I don't remember being hesitant about buying it at all, but we did put I think we put a trigger warning on it. I can't remember. And that's the only story we've done that with, if we did it. I'm not sure. And then the other story I was hesitant about because it was I thought it was right for Tor.com, but it's really kind of disgusting. And that A Human Stain by Kelly Robeson, which won the Nebula Award, even though it's horror. Anyway, so I just bought this new story that has a lot of sex in it and bad sex, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. So what was? Oh yeah, I used to be, when I started out in OMNI, when I was first promoted, I was concerned with, there are certain stories that I still think I made the right decision about not taking them for OMNI. Although I thought they were very publishable. Some of them were nominated for awards, and they were really great stories. But yeah, you have to make a judgment call whether it's right for the venue you're working in.
Yes.
And if that's the case, I will definitely recommend those stories to someone else who I think could take it.
So at Tor, let's see. I know that that it's more of a fantasy than science fiction at tour, or is it an enveloping?
It's mostly science fiction and fantasy. We're talking about tour.com, the website, right?
Yes. Yes.
Science fiction. I have done more horror and fantasy, but I've been in the last year or two, I've been publishing more, I've been acquiring more science fiction because I wanted to get back into science fiction editing. So it's a combination. It's completely mixed. I mean, you can see, actually the stories are, you can find the index by who edited them, who wrote them, and what genre they considered. So you can, if you want only science fiction stories, you can look it up and see which are the science fiction stories. And if you want horror, you can find that, or dark fantasy. So it's actually for people who don't want to mix their reading and are very strict about only reading science fiction. You can see what is considered science fiction. Obviously, there's occasionally crossover. Something might be science fiction and horror.
Okay. Now, tell me a little bit more about Event Horizon.
Event Horizon was started by me and Rob Kilheffer and Pam Weintraub and Kathy Stein, my colleagues at Omni. When Omni stopped publishing around '98, I guess it was, I think our last online issue or something, we decided to create a new website / magazine that was called Event Horizon, Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror, and it was basically what tour.com and a lot of other websites became. It was fiction. We had interviews with writers. We had columns, monthly columns. We had Lucia Shepard and Doug Winter, and people writing whatever they wanted to, as long as it somehow could relate. But some of it was pretty tenuous, just to genre, to fiction at all. We had round robin. It was a full-blown magazine, a website with a whole bunch of things on it, that reprints and original stories. We published the Girl Detective and the Specialist Hat were published there first by Kelly Link. I published early Jeff Ford stories there. It was great. It was fun, but we funded it ourselves, and we tried to get advertising, and we did get some advertising, except no one knew how to chase the money for the advertisers.
Oh no!
So we never got paid for the little advertising we got. It lasted a year and a half. We didn't know. It was around 1999 to 2000, I guess. It was a year and a half, I think, and we couldn't make money out of it, and after a while we couldn't either spend our own money anymore, and we didn't have, some of us had got other jobs and couldn't afford to do it anymore, so we suspended it. That's basically what happens with a lot of, even now today, magazines when you're real. But at that point, it was like we were really early on in the website business. We had created at Omni. We had created we had done EOSCon 1 and 2. EOSCon was an online convention that we produced for EOS publisher, part of which was HarperCollins, and we did online panels and things like that. It was fun, and so we did that. We did those two, but we got paid for that. We wanted to do that. We hoped to do that for Event Horizon, but it wasn't enough money. We didn't know what, it was pretty primitive. We didn't have Google Chat and stuff like that at the time, so the chatting was kind of primitive.
I could understand that, and then also the chasing the ad money as well.
We had no one who actually was, knew how to do that and how to say, you owe us money, blah blah blah.
Yes.
It was Rob. I mean, Pam and Kathy Stein were really behind the scenes. Rob and I ran that. I mean, he did all the production, and he produced and acquired most of the nonfiction, and I did the fiction and some of the nonfiction.
Okay.
It was fun. It was great. I mean, we loved doing it, and it was a really good website. But that's the way it goes.
Yes, I understand. Now, Matthew M. Bartlett asks, what do you enjoy the most about attending conventions?
Hanging out with my friends. It's like a floating party, so that's basically what it is. it's seeing the people who, it feels like, you just continue these conversations that you've had in other conventions. And sometimes I don't remember where people actually live because I just see them at conventions. So it's making contact with new people, new writers, and just hanging out with my friends. So that's the most fun. The panels are up. I don't go to other people's panels, and I love the coffee clutches. They're fun. I'm going to get to meet, only like 10 people, 15 people at a time and just talk about whatever they want. I try to get them to ask me questions about whatever they want to know. Kind of like this, but there are 15 of them.
Yes. And unfortunately, I am but one human being, so I imagine my conversation must be fairly limited.
No, there are other people who ask you questions, so there we go.
Yes. But speaking of coffee and coffee clicks, I'm going to take a brief moment to speak of our sponsor, Birds of a Feather Coffee Company. Roast unique craft coffees in small batches, so it's always fresh. Their signature blends showcase the amazing breadth and depth of flavors that coffee has to offer. The Night Owl blend, for instance, is a deep, rich cup of coffee with notes of smooth caramel, decadent cocoa, and bittersweet molasses with just a touch of acidity to cleanse the palate so you're ready for the next sip. Check out all of Bird's Coffees and order now at birdscoffeecompany.com. And I hear my phone in the background, and that's okay. They can leave a voicemail.
Now I'm curious about the Night Owl coffee. Does that mean it's decaf? Because otherwise, it's just keep you awake when you're a night owl.
It's keep you awake.
No, thinking, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's quite delicious at birdscoffeecompany.com. But yes, thank you so much again for taking the time to speak with me today. But let's see. What is the most gracious response to the setbacks and rejections that you have faced as an editor from different publications that may not want to accept that pitch?
You mean when I try to pitch a book to someone?
Yeah.
Well, they just say no. I mean, it's basically, we love your stuff, but we can't sell it. I mean, that's it.
Okay.
I mean, it's different from me rejecting stories. I mean, it's a different process. I don't feel it's a different kind of rejection. I don't feel the rejection that a writer would feel. This wanting to do an anthology, especially if I haven't done it yet, is not painful. I mean, yeah, I really want to do that anthology, but it's not part of me. It's not an emotional
investment.
Well, no, not at all. So it's a whole different situation from being a writer. And I actually, one of the nicest things I've ever heard about myself is that I give the nicest rejections in the industry. At least have in the past. Now I haven't heard that lately. But that's probably because lately, I mean, mostly I only look at solicited manuscripts. I don't look at slush piles. But I tried, when I reject a writer, it depends on whether I know them and work with them a lot. There are very few writers that say this sucks. Occasionally if I've worked with someone, I said, I hate this story. This is like the worst thing you've ever written. Why did you? I mean, this, I may have said that once to someone and I can think of who it is. But I bought many of the person's other stories. So, he knew that it was not to take it personally. However, there are some writers who take every rejection personally, no matter how many stories you bought by them. And it's like, and they say, you hate me. It's like, you hate me. Oh, look who's here. This is my friend Jack.
Oh.
My monster Jack. And there it goes.
Oh. Beautiful little creature.
Big, and he's a bastard. Sorry. Bite me? Yeah. Anyway. There are some people who are so super sensitive that you can't reject anything of theirs without them getting upset. And as a writer, you have to get a scale. I mean, you have to not let that. You can't let. You have to learn to not take it personally, because it's not well, I mean, I'm not saying it's never personal. I mean, maybe someone hates you, but it's usually not that. It's a story, you know, and it's a story. It may not work, and it may not work for that editor. It doesn't mean it's not going to work for another editor. I mean, there are horrible rejections. I mean, I'm sure that I have heard, I have seen, well, I've heard that people have gotten horrible rejections from editors, and that's inexcusable. I mean, I think it's, so I'm saying it's usually not personal, but once in a while it is, and then you just have to go to your friends and say, this person's a jerk.
Yes.
But don't ever write back to editors. I mean, don't ever respond to rejection letters. You know, that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah. See, now you say don't ever respond to rejection letters. From a personal experience, the only response that I've ever given to rejection letters are, thank you for your time.
Well, right.
I appreciate it.
And
have a wonderful day.
And if a rejection letter gives you information about how to make your story better, that's a good thing.
Yes.
I have over the years gotten 3 nasty responses to rejection letters where the person berated me for being a terrible editor, a terrible person. Oh, I obviously this, obviously that, obviously didn't read the story. But the weirdest one was, you know, Publishers Weekly, right?
Mm-hmm.
They used to have a My Say column. For all I know, they still do. I don't know. But one time I'm reading, this is when I actually got Publishers Weekly. I didn't buy it myself because it's too expensive, but I was at a publishing house. I was at OMNI, probably. And I look at the My Say column, and I said, this sounds really familiar. Oh, God, this woman's talking about me. and what she was saying, that she sent a story in, she got a letter with suggestions, and how horrible this is that this editor gave her suggestions about her story. How dare she? And I wrote back and said, are you kidding me? I mean, most of my writers would beg for feedback from me. I was like, what is wrong with you? You know, I wrote it in a nicer way. Yes. But that was like, are you kidding me? You know, this person is complaining because someone gave her feedback. Like, boy, you're an idiot. You're never going to get published, whoever you are.
Oh, my.
That was kind of weird. But the other ones are just insane. They were 3 male writers. 3 male writers who swore in their letters they would never send me anything again. Who within 3 years all sent me things. Never apologizing, never acknowledging that they were assholes and wrote these stupid letters, which I have on file because I kept everything. They're all at Liverpool University. So, yes, editors don't forget either when we're abused.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there really such a thing as the dreaded blacklist floating around between some of you?
No. I mean, great story, I'll buy it. If it's a great story by someone I don't like, I will probably buy it only if I don't have to work with them on it. I mean, if it's like really almost, you know, perfect. But the people who, for some reason or another, I might find repellent, probably would not write the kind of story I would buy in the first place. Seriously, you know, if they're not horrible. Depends on what you know. But no, there is no blacklist.
Okay.
Right?
I didn't really think so.
I know of. I mean, sorry.
It's okay. See, I'm more used to speaking to writers and creators, and not editors.
Do they think there's a blacklist against them?
No.
Paranoid people might.
No. Some of the independent ones, I believe I've seen some comments back and forth on a couple of forums of different genre writers, and independent only.
They self-publish? Is that what you mean? Or what? What do you mean by independent?
Just either names that I've not recognized before, struggling writers.
Well, I wouldn't call that independent. I would call
free agent, I guess one would call that. I have no idea.
Have they published before? Are these people who have published or not?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, then they're newbies. They're one, you know, hopeful writers to be.
Okay. So I'm glad to have a name to put to that now. So
no blacklist. Nope.
okay. Well, that is great to know. Other than editing fine works of fiction, what is one thing that you are exceptionally good at that does not involve the written word?
Finding bargains and antiquing and shopping.
Okay.
I'm a prime shopper. Hey, get off there, Jack! Jack's trying to get on. Oh, if you knock that lamp over, I'm going to kill you.
Oh no!
Jack. Oh God! All right, he's jumped. As long as my other cat's not there, I mean they fight. He's about to jump onto a big a shelf, and as long as the other cat's not on that shelf, it's okay. If the other cat's there, it's going to be a disaster.
Oh no!
I think someone's going to fall. But anyway,
well, Jack's there. I need to be here too.
Jack, please come here. Don't do that.
Aww.
Now,
what are you?
I'm a. What is it? What's the top karate thing? Anyway, I'm a top shopper.
Okay. What are you?
My friends.
What are you really bad at?
A lot of things, but let me think. Getting rid of books. Cleaning up my back room, which is a wreck.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I have way too many books. I have a storage locker of books, mostly some of my own, but also other people's. And even though, I mean, it's because I've been editing a year's best for 31 years, and that's why, because I may only keep. I didn't hear any screaming, so okay. I may only keep 1% of those books, but even so, 1% of 30 years worth of incoming titles is still all over the place. So I'm constantly trying to get them out of my house. I hate making my bed. Oh, I'm terrible at making my bed. Seriously, you asked. I hate it.
Okay.
I have a cleaning person come in more to make my bed than anything else. I don't mind vacuuming. I don't mind washing my floor once in a blue moon. But changing the linens of my bed is like agonizing to me.
Oh,
I'm
see,
at it.
that's the first thing I do when I wake up is make the bed.
No, I mean changing the linens.
Oh, change the linens. Yes,
Yeah.
I do that about once a week.
You do?
I do.
Yeah. I usually have someone come in once every 2 weeks or so.
Okay. Now, of the three genres, which one is your favorite? Horror, sci-fi, or fantasy?
I think horror is for now. It's been for a while, and I do like the dark a lot. Although it switches, I mean, but I love a lot of fantasy stories. I love a lot of science fiction, which is why I'm trying to get more into science fiction again. But I think horror for now. So.
The dark is a comfortable place to be.
I don't know about that, but it's
not very comfortable,
but it's good.
Fun. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I'm going to ask you a music question.
All right.
What's the first music album you bought with your own money?
I think it was. I'm trying to remember the title. It was a Rolling Stones album, High Grass and Rolling Hills. It was like a compilation album, not a compilation, a best of. I remember the cover. It had blue on it and the 5 guys, whatever, in the band. I think that was the first one I ever bought.
Okay. Let's see. Now, Ellen, I'm going to go ahead and go a little meta here.
Uh-oh.
What question do you wish I would have asked you so far?
I don't know. See, I don't know. I have no imagination. You don't understand. That's why I'm an editor. Seriously, an editor versus a writer. I don't have any ideas of my own. I have to use other people's ideas. So this actually goes into that. I have no idea what. You've asked me things that are fine, that I like answering.
Okay.
There's nothing special.
Okay. Now, next one, let's see. What's the most agonizing career decision that you have ever had to make?
Oh, well, no, this wasn't, well, it was agonizing, not because, it wasn't a career decision, it was a decision to save my life in a way, and it was a job decision. I had worked for 4, maybe 6 miserable months. I worked for this guy, Don Fine, who was well known in the publishing industry, mainstream publishing, for being a jerk and an asshole and abusive towards his employees. And I guess I worked there for like around 6 months. I was desperate. I was warned not to take a job with him, but I was desperate at the time. I had run out of unemployment. I just had to take a job. And so I worked with him. I worked in that, it was called, at the time, his publishing house was called Arbor House. And it was a small house, well known, a lot of respect for it, did good books. He was a good editor. He was a shitty human being. I moved in 6 months from receptionist to assistant editor. The good thing about it, I learned a little about publicity. It was a small office. We did everything. I did some sub-rights. I did publicity. I did marketing. And I actually edited my first book there. I edited a romance book. And then but I was miserable. But in that period of time, I moved from being the farthest from him in the office, like the receptionist. He wanted me to be his assistant because his assistant quit. And that's when I put my foot down. I said, no, I can't. I don't want to. I resigned. And I didn't know if I'd get unemployment after working there because I was quitting. But, I mean, basically I woke up every morning sick to my stomach. I mean, he never was abusive towards me, but just apparently, like at least twice a year, the building management and the whole building were complained to by neighboring offices because they could hear him cursing so loudly. And I resigned, and it was one of the hardest things I've done. Nothing to do with career, but to do with my life, because I was like sick to my stomach every day. And I guess my parents, I mean, I told my parents, and I mean, I knew I wouldn't starve, but it was still pretty worrisome. I didn't have a job when I resigned. And I realized now afterwards I probably would have gotten unemployment. And within 2 weeks I got another job, but I probably would have gotten unemployment because I'm sure the guy had a reputation for being abusive. I mean, I think I might have gotten unemployment. But that was one of the hardest things I'd done because I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't have a job. I had no idea what I was going to do next. And it was just lucky, again, happenstance, that I got a job at Reinhardt and Winston within the time I resigned. I was one of the few people who resigned. Most people ran out screaming, crying, actually.
Oh, wow.
But mostly female. Yeah. So, but other than that, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
to work for a tyrant.
He was a monster. And when he died, we all celebrated. It's like, oh, he's gone. I would dance on his grave if I ever was near it. He was a piece of shit.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
There were more people like that than there are now. I think there are fewer editors, publishers who get away with that now. But at that time, there were a few people like that. I applied. Oh, well, this wasn't agonizing at all. It was easy, actually. I mean, I was working at OMNI. I think I was still working at OMNI. And I was, a job opened up with a publisher or an editor and another person who was pretty bad towards her employees. Not as bad as Dawn Fine was, but still, she had a reputation. And when I met her, she was actually really nice to me. And I would have been put in charge of this company, this imprint, pretty much. Not totally in charge, but still I would have been the senior editor. And I agonized over it. I went back and called 2 people who had worked with her before, and I said, tell me why I shouldn't take this job. I said, don't take the job. And I said, don't take the job. Remember, this is why. She's horrible. Don't do it. And I mean, the thing is, I don't know why I would have left OMNI. Maybe OMNI was faltering and I thought we were going to go out of business. It couldn't have been because I didn't have a job at the time. I don't think. But maybe. So, I mean, it was, I'm glad I didn't. I mean, I'm not a good book editor anyway. I would have been miserable. Even but working with that person, it would have been like, why? It would have been.
Yeah.
And I actually can't remember. Maybe I was unemployed. I can't imagine even going for the interview if I was employed. So maybe I was looking for a job at the time. I don't know.
That's one thing that I have noticed over the years is don't necessarily take fully to somebody else's reputation. Because that's someone else's interpretation and not your own.
When enough people say the same thing, you do pay attention. No, I'm glad I didn't take the job. No, she would have been abusive towards me.
Oh, okay.
You know, I'm sure she would have been. No, I mean, they were right. I mean, I knew that I wouldn't want to work for that person. I mean, I don't regret that at all. I knew that I was the right decision. It was the only reason I was tempted is because I was fooled by her being nice. Even though I knew her reputation as being horrible to most people.
Okay.
And which means she would turn on me, you know. I mean, Don Fine would like, he would be like, okay, 1 minute, then he'd turn on you and you know, like figuratively kick in the teeth. I mean, he was a drunk. So, you know, when enough people say it, you do believe it.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And now you're
sorry, I didn't mean to bum you out.
No, you're reminding me of someone that I worked for in the past. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think these people get away with this kind of thing as much as they, certainly not as much as they did. You do read about people getting away with sexual harassment, but that's different. And it's also more insidious, I think, than just being openly, verbally abusive towards your employees.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because openly verbally abusive, I definitely
they're like, who needs it
for a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary if you don't, you know, if you're in a position where you don't feel you can leave the job, it's really bad.
Yeah.
And that's in any field, not just publishing.
That's true. Now our interviews generally last about an hour. But if you continue, that's
fine.
Absolutely.
I'm fine to go on a little bit. I just have to go shopping after this. No big.
Okay. How did you make your first dollar?
Babysitting. Oh, I got an allowance when I was a kid, but I babysat, and that was fun. I love babysitting because the kids I babysat were not babies; they were not little. I just put them in bed, ate all the candy, and watched all the TV. That was fun. I never had any problems. Like no one got sick. No one had any problems. It was a great job babysitting, and I made some extra money. So that was my very first job. Okay. Someone just Zoe Keating, who is a fabulous musician, celloist. She just said, what are some of the jobs you've had on Twitter? She was started kind of a thing, and I went back through, and I realized I didn't even include all of them. I mean, I've had, people have a lot of different jobs over their lives until they get into if they're lucky, they get into the career that they want. But up until getting to publishing, I did a lot of things that were, part-time gigs mostly, and not very interesting. I temped for a long time, for a lot of times, for Kelly Girls, which was a temp agency, where you would go to some place for like 2 or 3 days. I worked in a lot of banks, which were so boring.
Yes. Reception banks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How do you like to hit the reset button after a terrible day or experience?
Well, it's hard. Since I work from home, it's kind of a weird, I'm not sure how to answer that. I have to think outside of when I'm home. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. I'm not someone, it's weird. I'm not depressive at all. So I am so easily jollied out of depression that it's stupid. It's like, yeah, my cats will come play with me. Yeah, I'll have, it's like, Anything, talking to a friend. I'm trying to think of a bad situation. I mean, a specific situation, and I can't.
Okay.
Well, I just do something else. I just turn around and do something else. I don't watch TV. I'm only allowed to watch my television, which is not a television, but just the DVDs. I have a schedule. I'm allowed to watch Friday nights and Saturdays. Other than that, I'm not allowed to watch it. This is my own self-imposed regulation, or I would be watching it too much. So I look forward to those Friday. I try not to schedule things for Friday night or Saturday night. That'll interfere with my date with myself.
Okay.
So I know I can look forward to watching whatever I'm watching. My binge watching or whatever.
Okay. Now you are a wonderful person for me to ask this question. You have the power to create one perfect movie or TV adaptation of a story that you have purchased for an anthology in the past. Which one do you pick?
Okay, I'll pick something recent only because it's easier in a way. I mean, I have a lot of favorite stories over the years, and they're probably one of my best of the year, and the best of the year. But there's a story that I just published in The Devil in the Deep that I'm very fond of. It's humorous horror, and I usually hate humorous horror. And I think it could be adapted, but it would have to be adapted perfectly well, or they'd screw it up. And it's called Shit Happens, and it's by Michael Marshall Smith, and it takes place on the Queen Mary. And something awful happens on shore. Well, something comes from the sea, some kind of disease or something. I don't remember how. And basically, it's a corporate event. It's based on the StokerCon that was on the Queen Mary, but it's not a scientific. It's not a horror event. It's a corporate event. And this from the character, one point of view character, and a lot of the people on the boat become zombie-ish. But it's funny. It's hilarious. And so it'd have to be done with a totally deft touch, with his dialogue, And then there's this person on the shore, his secretary, who you never see until the very end. You don't see her anyway, but who is like the super duper secretary who will office manager who will create everything perfectly. We'll make everything right. And I would love to see that done as a really perfect adaptation, but I can't see it happening. I mean, I could see someone doing it, adapting it as an episode of a Twilight Zone or, whatever kind of horror triptych, but I can't see them doing it right. It's because it's especially because it's horror and humor. As I said, for me, most horror humor does not work at all. I usually find it heavy-handed and stupid, and this one actually is horrific and hilarious. So I would love to see that done, but it's not going to happen.
Well, again, Ellen, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Well, have a wonderful afternoon shopping.
It's not shopping for fun. It's shopping. What am I doing? I don't know. Oh, yogurt. I have to go to the Green Market and get my yogurt.
I'm headed to the store myself. Time to get some potatoes. So anyway, have a wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to be on the show again.
Absolutely, Ellen.